Hi, I want to welcome everybody. My name is Alicia Tutt, and I am a management analyst with the city in the Housing and Public Services Division. In my role, I oversee several of the city's nonprofit grant programs. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be posted on the city's website within a day or two. So if you're not able to stay for the whole thing, or if you want to watch it again or have other staff who want to be able to watch it, it will be available for that. I do want to let everyone know that everyone is joining with audio on and video on mute, and your cameras are disabled. So at the end of our presentation, you will have the ability to raise your hand and unmute for live questions and answers. During the presentation, if you have questions, we ask that you please enter them in the Q&A section, which is at either the top or the bottom of the screen, depending on how your computer is set up. Questions that are not answered as we go through the slides will receive a response at the end during the Q&A portion. So if we don't get to your question right away when you enter it, we will, I promise, either through the slides that we're going through or at the very end when we go through. Please note that the chat box is not being monitored. It's just too many different places for us to pop around through this. So everything should be entered into the Q&A portion. Again, if you have questions after the webinar and after the Q&A session has ended, I encourage you to reach out to staff. Our contact information will be in the slides, and we can talk further if you have questions beyond that. So at this time, I'd like to let our other presenter introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Jody Marino. I'm the Community Events Program Manager for the City of Elk Grove. So in addition to producing all of the city events, I also oversee the Event Sponsorship Grant Program, which is helping all of you wonderful nonprofits produce your events in the City of Elk Grove. So Alicia and I work together on the grants, and she handles one area, I handle the other, but we collaborate on just about everything. And she knows a lot more than me, but you're welcome to reach out to both of us for any questions that you might have.
Great. So for today's agenda, we're going to go over the available grant funding opportunities that the city currently has open, talk about the application process. We're going to talk about or highlight some of the application questions by grant type, and talk a little bit about our grant policies, and then again, have a Q&A at the end. But to get things started, we have a couple of short polls just to get an idea of who's on the webinar and what grant programs you're interested in. So I will get the first one started. Really, first we just want to look at your population served. So as an organization, who do you mainly serve? If you are not with an organization and you're just a resident, or if you're another one of our city employees on the call, there's a not applicable button at the end. Okay, it looks like most people got their responses in. So just if you want to see the general public, there's low income is a pretty high percentage, but a wide variety of those that are serving all different populations on our call today. I think we had about 67 people registered for this call. So I think we have about 35 participating currently. So there's a good number. All right, now let's do the other one. Oh, sorry. My technical assistants, I don't do these polls that frequently. All right, our next one is looking at prior funding. So this question is just if your organization that you're representing today has applied previously for City of Elk Grove funding, just to kind of get an idea of experience levels on our call today. Okay, we have more returning than non-returning, which is good. Usually we're about half and half. So I'm glad to see a lot of people who are returning. We definitely have some new stuff to share this year. So we appreciate everybody being on the call today. Okay, so for the city, we currently have 3 funding opportunities that are posted. We start our process early in the year. So all of these are for grant activities that will take place starting in July. So we start early to get through the application process, the review, city council. Some of our federal programs require a lot of federal planning and work and reports that need to be submitted to HUD. So we start early. But the 3 funding opportunities that we have are the Community Service Grant. And this year we have traditional, which is our historical CSG, as well as a new one-time funding that I'm definitely going to talk more about later. And then we have our Community Development Block Grant, which is our federal funds, and then our Event Sponsorship Grant program. To give you a little bit of basics on the Community Service Grant, it's a locally funded grant program that is approved annually by our city council, and it supports activities that benefit Elk Grove residents. It's a fairly flexible funding source. We allow for ongoing program costs, equipment purchases, supplies, capital improvements to facilities. There's a lot of different categories that you can apply under. The maximum award available to any entity under the community service grant is $100,000. It's a little tricky this year because we now have the 2 pots of funding. We have traditional and one time. And so the maximum for any one entity under either of those is $100,000. So meaning theoretically, an organization could apply to be awarded the maximum under both the traditional and the one time for 2 different activities. It can't be the same activity, but for 2 separate activities. We're going to talk a little bit more about the budget and the total available funding in a couple slides, which will put this a little bit more into perspective. And later on, I'm going to go more into detail on what the traditional versus one-time programs are to provide more clarity. Since we don't have a ton of funds, but theoretically, the maximum you can apply for in either of those programs is $100,000. This is the CSG is not for fundraising and one-time events. Those are what the event sponsorship grant is for, and Jody will talk about those in a minute. And the funding for community service grants is really intended to expand capacity and not replace other funding sources that you already have in place. Our community development block grant. So since 2003, the city has received an annual entitlement grant from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. HUD awards grants to entitlement community grantees, which is the city, to carry out a wide range of community development activities directed towards revitalizing neighborhoods, economic development, and providing improved community facilities and services. Awarded entities become a subrecipient of federal funds and are required to comply with all applicable federal regulations. So throughout the application, there are links and information for you to research and learn more about the requirements of what a CDBG grant is. But there is not a maximum award amount under the CDBG program. However, as you'll see in a bit, there's limitations based on the total amount of funding available and what you're proposing to do. All activities under this program must benefit primarily low-income persons or households who are Elk Grove residents.
For the event sponsorship grant that we award, it's also awarded annually by the city council, and it's really there to help Elk Grove-based nonprofit organizations that want to host a special event that can benefit the Elk Grove community. Some of the rules are that it has to take place in the city limits of Elk Grove. It can't be around political or religious purposes. If it is around religious purposes, it has to be to educate the community and relate to our diversity, equity, inclusion, and being a city welcome to all. So some of the diversity events that I'm talking about like that could be like a Holi event or a Diwali event, which some have some religious purposes, but real are more speaking towards diversity in the city of Elk Grove. And if your event has a fundraising component, it's eligible if all net proceeds will be provided to that nonprofit that serves primarily Elk Grove residents. So if you're a Sacramento-based nonprofit, but you have a center in Elk Grove and you're doing an event and you're going to raise funds for that, then that is acceptable. We are flexible with our funding too, and you can ask for many different things. When you apply for the event sponsorship grant, you can ask for direct funding, which is cash. You can ask for city facility use, which is District 56 and Old Town Plaza. And then you can also ask for in-kind services, which is police, public works, integrated waste, and marketing.
So for the fiscal year 25-26 program year, so again, starting July 1st, these are the amounts that we anticipate having available under each funding category. The community service grant and event sponsorship grant are both locally funded programs, and those amounts are determined as part of the annual city budget process. So whereas CDBG funding is contingent upon the passing of the federal budget by Congress. So the amount shown here for CDBG is what the city received for their current fiscal year, the 24-25 program year. And since we sometimes don't know the federal allocation until May, we estimate by on the assumption that we're receiving level funding, and then we adjust accordingly as soon as the feds let us know what our allocation is. So for the CDBG, additional funding may also be available for capital projects as our current programs are closed out. If we have programs that close out and we have leftover funding, we're able to reallocate those towards capital projects, but not public services. Due to federal regulations, the amount we're allowed to allocate towards public services under CDBG is 15% of our total award. So you'll see if 982,758 is our total award, we're only allowed to allocate 15% of that to public services. We're allowed to allocate 20% to the administration of the grant, but we typically only allocate 15% and then put the rest towards other projects. Jody, do you have anything you want to add?
No, same with ESG. It's flexible. It depends on how many applications we get. We take all of them, we review them, we try and balance it. I mean, just for reference, there was 42 events last year, so 80,000 cash doesn't go very far for 42 events. The bulk of the money is in kind because we do pay for those uses of District 56. We pay for police services. We pay for all of that. So once all the applications are received, we go through all of that. We all put in what we think it would cost to support each event. And then that number can be flexible based on the amount of applications we've received and the discretion of the city manager.
The CSG and CDBG budgets are less flexible. They don't, they won't grow with the more increased requests that come in. I think the last few years we've ranged around 2.3 or 2 million in requests of funding for what we have available. And if you're just looking at, you know, public services as a whole, it's not a lot of funding. All right, so our next quick poll, this is our last poll, I think. Based on that very brief info, we wanted to take a quick pulse to see which types of funding that you believe you're interested in applying for. If you don't worry if you're still undecided. Hopefully by the end of this, you will have a better idea. But this is kind of just based on a quick overview, and it could be more than one. All right, so mostly community service grant and event sponsorship grant, the majority of those that are looking to apply. It's great. Well, you'll get to learn a lot about both. So as I mentioned, we have two funding opportunities or applications out there. The system that we use, the online system, Web Grants, calls grants as funding opportunities. So that's how we're referring to them. One is the Community Service Grant and CDBG, Community Development Block Grant. We combine those into one application. So you're actually able to answer and apply for one or both or under those. And then our event sponsorship is a separate application. It requires different questions because it's a different type of a program and needs different information. So organizations may apply for community service grant, community development block grant, and or event sponsorship funding with no limit on the number of applications that they can submit. However, each distinct activity or event requires its own separate application. So if you're doing a service activity and a facility improvement project, that would be two different applications, as would two different events. If you have a fundraising run and a dinner, those are two different applications. Organizations should not submit more than one application for the same activity or event though. So just one application per event or per activity. And then again, this is for-profit entities and individuals are oh, did I do this? Oh, sorry, I flipped too quick. The eligible organizations, nonprofits that are corporations, associations, agencies, or faith-based organizations with a nonprofit status under the Internal Revenue Service are eligible to apply. Organizations must also be registered and remain in good standing with the California Secretary of State and the California Attorney General Registry of Charitable Trust, if required by law to be registered. So that is not our place to tell you whether you're required to be registered as a city. That is your board and your legal counsel's knowledge to be able to know if you need to be registered. So if you are not already, please look into that, since those are definitely things that need to be responded to in the question. Government agencies that are independent of the city of Elk Grove are also eligible to apply, as well as for CDBG, city departments apply for some of the capital funding programs as well. Applying organizations for CDBG and CSG, we ask that they have at least completed one full fiscal year as a nonprofit. So the programs are not really designed to fund startups or organizations that are just starting off. We want to make sure that you have at least a year under your belt as a nonprofit to be able to show your financials and show the work that you have done as an organization. And this is where for-profit entities and individuals are not eligible for these programs. Just as a disclosure, everything, unless otherwise exempt under applicable law, everything submitted and all information received from an applicant, whether it's in connection with a grant application or grant funded activities, is subject to disclosure pursuant to the California Public Records Act. So we've had it before where some people will do a public records request and ask to see copies of the applications. So we would provide read-only access to those applications, or should they be requested. So just know when you're submitting information, not to include personal information. If you're putting attachments for budgets, don't put your bank statement numbers on there or things like that. And if you're putting client information, that you're making sure that it's coded to, so it's not disclosing personal information. The two different applications or funding opportunities have different closing deadlines. And we do this on purpose for your ease as well as ours, but mostly for our grantees' sake, for our applicants' sake. So you have a little bit of window room between the two different applications because a lot of people, as you see, are probably applying for both our event sponsorship grant and our CSG or CDBG. And so we want to give you some time to be able to do that, as well as historically, we've had applications come into the community service grant that really are more events, and it gives us the opportunity to flag those and have you reapply under the correct program so that you have time to do that. So there is some time in between those two processes. So some basic information on the CDBG and CSG program. So types of eligible activities, this is an incomplete list. It's not perfect. So I'm sure there might still be questions and not everybody falls under these, but they're really for programs, project, or activities that provide direct benefit to City of Elk Grove residents. You can have public services for a variety of different populations. We named some of the targeted populations here. looking at food or commodity assistance programs. So, senior meal programs or food bank type programs, job training and education, recreation, sports and community programs, public safety, crime prevention, housing assistance programs, improvements to existing facilities, or acquisition and purchase of new facilities. So those are some of the activities that are eligible under the CSG or CDBG. So if you're looking at CSG, CDBG, or both, what do I apply for? So organizations may apply up to 2 funding categories per application for CSG, CDBG. Both CDBG and CSG may be selected in the same application. However, only one type of CSG funding, so either traditional or one-time, and I'm going to get to that in the next slide, can be selected per application. So a separate application is required for each program or project. I think I've said this before, but while you may submit multiple applications, only one application is permitted per program or project. And if you're unsure which funding category to apply for after this webinar, you can reach out to me and we can talk through it and go through it together to figure out what's the best fit. I do recommend that most, if not all, organizations apply for community service grant. Even if you're applying for CDBG, it's good to pick one of the CSG boxes as well, because then that gives us the flexibility to determine if the funding fits better under another program or if we have additional funding under one. CDBG has additional eligibility and reporting requirements, while CSG is the most flexible of them. So the CDBG grant recipients, again, I said, become subrecipients of the federal government. So they have the role of administering federal grants on behalf of the city and are required to comply with applicable federal regulations. And some organizations find that to be too administratively burdensome, so they choose just to apply for CSG. So it's really looking at the CDBG program and seeing if that's something that your organization is willing to do. You have to keep accurate financial records and invoices, document the income, race, and ethnicity of all that are served through the activity, and also comply with labor standards, compliance, environmental, relocation, and fair housing laws. So if you're applying for more than one funding source, it's not going to negatively impact the organization's chances of receiving funding. So if you're not sure and you're like CDBG and CSG and answer all the questions in the application form, we will help determine what the best funding source is as if you're awarded funding. So the CSG traditional and one-time, this is the new category that we have for this fiscal year. We saw in years past, we've had a need where there are some organizations that just have a one-time equipment or capital improvement expense that they're looking for. It's not really an ongoing program or something that is continuing, and they have struggled sometimes to compete with some of our other ongoing programs that fill up most of our community service grant program. So we added this, the city added a new category and added some additional funding to the community service grant to be able to allow this. So excuse me, the traditional, again, is reoccurring operational or program expenses, as well as capital improvements can fall under this as well. The maximum award available to any one entity in a single year is 100,000. We only have about 400,000 available, so typically those amounts are much less than 100,000 since we're awarding probably 20 or so different applications. And recipients in this category can apply for funding on an annual basis. There's no limit to how many years in a row that they can apply for funding under this category. The one-time category, which is the new one, is really designed for capital improvements or one-time purchases of equipment or supplies that support the mission and operations of eligible entities that are serving our Elk Grove residents. The grants awards will range from a minimum of 5,000 to a maximum of 100,000. 100,000 is what we have in the budget, so that's the full amount. But organizations can apply for amounts in that range. And then recipients of the grant, if they are awarded funding, you have to wait at least 3 years to apply under the one-time funding pot again. It's really designed to help organizations over time, more organizations over time. So there are limits on a 3-year. For the community service and grant and community development block grant budget, again, incomplete lists here, but we wanted to give you some categories of what some eligible costs might be and some ineligible costs. Personnel, staff, office, facility use, materials and supplies, communications. These are all under eligible costs. Again, these are more the reoccurring expenses, so probably for that traditional community service grant. For the one-time, it would be capital improvements or equipment or one-time things. Ineligible costs that are not directly related to providing services to Elk Grove residents. So if your program is serving 50% Elk Grove residents and 50% Sacramento residents, we're only going to cover costs if awarded for those Elk Grove residents. So you'll have to have additional funding elsewhere to cover the costs for those that are not Elk Grove residents. Ineligible is also programs or services that promote religion or political activities. We do not cover marketing, incentives, or fundraising activities, including administrative time. So personnel time towards those activities is not eligible. Entertainment, furnishings, or personal property. Meals and food-related expenses other than food assistance. And this is a tricky one because I always get applications that have food in there. If you're having a meeting and you want to provide snacks or food, that's not eligible under our grant funding. The only things that are is if you are using food assistance, like a commodities, whether it's a food bank or a senior meal program or things like that, those are eligible. But just general providing food to the youth in the program that you're promoting is not an eligible cost. And then anything that is incurred prior to July 1st, 2025, which is when our grant contracts will start. So there's a lot of flexibility in the cost that we can cover, but we do require documentation for all of it. So we want you to think really hard when you're preparing your budget and your request, what are things that are easy for your organization to document? We're asking for receipts, payroll summaries, mileage logs, things that you're tracking and that you're able to submit. You will have to submit all of that with your reimbursement request for us to be able to cover it. And all costs that have to be clearly related to the approved scope of work that will be in the approved grant. If the activity, as I mentioned before, serves non-Elk Grove residents, organizations will need to have acceptable accounting methods to allocate or separate out the costs to be able to show the difference between what other funding sources you're using to serve those non-residents. And then for the community development block grant, again, those grantees have to comply to the uniform administrative requirements, cost principles, and audit requirements for federal rewards. And the link to CFR 200 is there. You can Google it as well, but when we share these PowerPoint slides at the end, you'll be able to click on those links to find more information. So funding requests in general, the CSG and CDBG program are designed to provide supplemental funding and not intended to fully finance proposed activities. There are requests that do come in, but generally we're looking at organizations that have other funding supporting their programs as well, and that it's not asking 100% of the costs come from these grant programs. For existing activities, if the organization is not planning on expanding services or assisting more people than what they maybe previously had, then your funding request really should clearly justify why its current funding is insufficient. So if you're new requesting funding and you've been providing the same program in the years past, what happened to that funding source and why is that insufficient and that you need to request additional funding from the city. And then again, if you're serving both Elk Grove and non-Elk Grove, your funding application has to calculate the percentage of proposed time that will be spent on Elk Grove participants and request no more than that as your budget items.
My turn. Thanks, Alicia, for running the slides. So eligible events for the event sponsorship grant program include all the things you're seeing on your screen and more. So if you want to hold a concert or a performance, a festival, a parade, a tournament, if you're doing a run or a walk, you can do a conference. Even breakfast, lunch, dinner, reception fundraisers, like over the weekend, we had the MLK breakfast. And there's lots of other things that could be an event that maybe we don't have listed on here because the world of events is really expanding. So we still have health restrictions on our contract because at any time, if something was to go sideways and we want to make sure that we are protecting our residents, that we keep this on here. So you have to comply with all applicable public health restrictions if it's imposed by any federal, state, or local government. And you would notify us in advance if there was any changes, like if you wanted to change a date, location, or a cancellation. And we would work with everyone to amend your contracts if there is a change in your event that needed to happen because of a health restriction. But substantial changes made after the preliminary awards have been determined may result in a change of funding or use of city facilities or in-kind services awarded just because if the date's not available, if you wanted to move it somewhere else. But we would always work with you during any of that because obviously it's a federal emergency. So that's something that we've had to do with our own events. So we will definitely work with you to make any of those changes. Again, we talked about this a little bit before, but you can ask for direct funding in the form of cash. You can ask for facility use of Old Town Plaza, which is on Elk Grove Boulevard. And then we also have District 56, which is on Civic Center Drive. We have a beautiful community center that a lot of people love to host their events in. We also have an outdoor facility, which is the Avenue, which is out front of the community center. And it's a great place for outdoor festivals and events. And actually the ground's marked every 10 feet with a little coin, so you don't actually have to mark it off for your booths. You can ask for both. You can ask for an indoor and outdoor. The aquatic center is also something that's on our grant program, but it's only for local swim teams to use. And so we've had like the Bill Rose Classic and some other swim meets there that those groups apply for. We talked about in-kind being police department. That's for traffic management. So our PD usually gets involved with a lot of runs, parades, things like that for traffic management. And then they also get involved if it's a very large event, like I would say the Dickens Fair is a big event, right? And we close down a road. So if you've got more than 2,500 to 3,000 people at your event, then PD would also get involved for overall event safety only, but they cannot be security. You still have to provide your own security. PD is there just to make sure the overall event has security and has police presence so all the guests feel safe attending. They close roads, they'll handle traffic for that. They'll work with our public works department to deploy barricades and A-frames and water barricades and things needed like that. We talked about integrated waste before, so you can also ask for that as part of your request for your application, and that includes trash, recycle, and organic carts and service. And then marketing and promotion. We try and help you promote your event because we want you to be successful, so that's something else that you can ask for in kind.
Now we're going to talk a little bit more about the application process and web grants, which is our online grants management system. All applications are completed and submitted online through web grants. The link is here, but it's also available on our website at elkgrovecity.org/grants. It's also been on all of our promotions, I think, at least that grants website. City staff has to approve every registration, which is me. So I approve every registration. So usually I try to get to it day of, but it could take 1 or 2 business days, especially if it occurs if you register overnight or if you register over the weekend. But likely it's usually within a few hours. So just know if you've registered and you haven't received the login information yet, it's because I need to go in and approve it. We ask all individuals who need access to your application, they should register their own account. We do not recommend sharing accounts. The system tracks who's in there and who's completed certain parts of information and has an audit log in it. So we really want you to be using your own account for those purposes, and it helps manage the application as well. Again, each registration has to be approved by me. If you are doing multiple organizations, if you're a grant writer or you're affiliated with multiple organizations, email me and let me know before you register, because I will have you register one of your organizations and then I will help register the others and link you all together. Just the way that the system is set up, it needs a little bit of my finagling in the back, but it works perfectly fine, and you can be associated with as many organizations as you volunteer or work with or want to help with their application. So again, multiple applications for different projects are allowed in the system. So you are able to submit multiples. This is what you're gonna see when you log on to Web Grants, when you get on there. On the right-hand side, there are some blue links that have step-by-step instructions on how to register, how to apply for funding. I have several other how-to documents for Web Grants that I've created. So if they're not listed on here, if there's something that you have questions on, ask me and I can send you. They have screenshots in them. They're fairly easy to follow to be able to go through all of those steps. If for some reason you forgot your user ID or your password, if you haven't logged in a while, since a year since you've applied previously, please use the forgot user ID and reset password functions versus reapplying, because I will deny it if you're already in the system or if your organization is already in the system. When you register, you're going to put your personal contact and organizational information. So your phone number, your email, those types of things. The first person registering an organization is going to enter in as much information as possible when they're registering. There's a lot of different questions. Some are required, most aren't, but they're going to try and enter in as much as they can. It's important because that is whoever's registering the organization first. That organization, once it gets in there, is being linked to anybody else who registers after that. You can go after the fact and add or edit that general information about the organization, so it's not the end of the world if you've forgotten an attachment or you want to make changes to what was there before. It's also important on an annual basis to go in and look about your organization information, because a lot of times staffing change, your executive director changes, and you want to be able to update that. And again, if you need help figuring out how to do that in the system, shoot me an email. I have a how-to document that I can send your way that I can share for that. If your organization is already registered, so if you're just new to the staff or you're new to helping create and you know that an organization has already applied in previous years, only fill out what is required, because all the other stuff you fill out is just going to get deleted when I link you to the existing account. So don't really worry about spending a lot of time entering in all of the other information, because it's going to be it's going to go away when I link you to what's already existing. And then anybody who's applying for CDBG funding also needs to make sure that they're entering their SAM unique entity ID in their sam.gov. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later if you don't know what that is. But making sure that that is in there. The attachments when you go to apply are your articles of incorporation, your bylaws, board of directors, your IRS federal tax exempt letter, and a signed W-9. So if you don't have all those when you register, you can go back and add them at a later date. So when you log into Web Grants, once you're in there, you'll be able to go to funding opportunities. On the left-hand side is kind of your dashboard, which your menu of options, and it shows all of the different things. If you go to funding opportunities, that's where you're going to see the two that are currently posted and open. One is the Community Development Block Grant Community Service Grant, and the other is the Event Sponsorship Grant. So make sure you have the right funding opportunity for what you want to apply for at the time. Again, you can apply under both. That's not a problem. Just making sure that you're selecting the right one when you go to apply. Once you click on, I'm going to go back real quick. Once you click anywhere along that line where it says posted, the green box, if you click anywhere along that, it's going to go ahead and open up the funding opportunity. It doesn't look like there's a live link there, but if you just click anywhere along that line, in any of those boxes, the title or the date or the agency, any of that, it'll open it up. We ask that you fully read the funding opportunity details and description. They're a little bit long, but there's a lot of information in there that both Jody and I have put in there that talk about eligibility, some of the requirements, the funding timeline is in there. There's a good deal of information, more than what we're sharing today. So we want you to fully read it before you start your application. And then you can add, there's different ways once you go in that you can add other people to your application. So say you start the application, but you want to be able to add other people who've already registered accounts in web grants so that they can assist with the application. You can do that under your general information page. And then you're going to go through what's called forms in the system, but there's application components or forms. You're going to go through and answer all of the different questions. And again, when you look at that login page of web grants and it's how to apply, if you pull that Word document or that PDF document up, it's going to show you screenshots of what this looks like, and how to go through all of these different steps. So it's not, I'm sure if you haven't been in there, this sounds all gibberish right now, but when you get through, it's a pretty fairly intuitive process that walks you through the different steps. So you have to complete each of the forms or the components before you're able to actually submit your application. Prior to submitting your application, you can edit as often as you wish. You can come in and out. It's not a problem. You have from now until the deadline to be able to go in and do that. But just know that once you submit, it's locked for editing. So you want to make sure that you make all of your edits before. And I've said it 1,000 times, I'll probably say it more, but you can apply for more than one application in each funding opportunity. Some tips for web grants. The application does not save automatically when you click between questions. So we want to make sure that when you're done entering text, that you hit the save. It'll prompt you if you try to move forward. It'll prompt you without saving and say, hey, do you really want to leave without saving? But just making sure, like if you're leaving it up on your computer screen, we have it set so it's not going to log you out for hours. I can't remember exactly how long. I remember we set it really long though, so it doesn't log me out for a full day's work if I just stay logged in the whole time. So, but know that if you do close your browser, it's not going to save it if you didn't hit the save button. So please make sure you are saving when you're moving between the different forms. Blue text in web grants almost always indicates a clickable link, whether it's in the system or it's an external source. For example, a lot of the CDBG documents and those federal regulations that I mentioned are linked in there. So you're able to click on them and take you straight to that website to be able to look at it a little bit further. Required fields are shown in red text with a red asterisk. So know that you won't be able to move forward or submit. You won't be able to submit that section until you've completed the red required fields. If you try to save a form and nothing happens, you're likely missing text in one of those required fields. So if you scroll through the form, a big giant pop-up box does not occur when you're trying to save it. But what does happen is if you scroll through, you'll see a little red section that says this field is required. So sometimes it's a little tricky to be able to find what you're missing, but because it doesn't just pop up and just show you really big, but it does have a red section that shows you this field is required. So if it's not looking like it's saving and it says it wasn't saved, just scroll through that page until you find what is required. This is some more advanced entry work if you are interested in formatting for your application. It's a plain text system, so fancy formatting does not show up. So this really comes into play when you're cutting and pasting, which totally encourage, but want you to make sure that you're looking at what you're what is entering in as text. If you want to put breaks or lines in your text, you actually have to use a little fancy HTML code. So I put it in here if you're really interested in it. A lot of times people get irritated because all of their text just kind of runs together in a big long paragraph when they're looking at it. If you want to fix that, there's a way to do it. It does take some of your character count though, so just know that. But knowing that we also know that it is not your fault that the paragraphs all run together. And so we as reviewers understand that and are we're pretty used to reading it by now. So it's not the end of the world, and it's okay if you don't go ahead and put these breaks in there. But if you are a perfectionist like me sometimes and you want to put those in there, there's how to do it. There are some maximum character counts for each text box, so please make sure that you're looking at that. And this is really important when you're cutting and pasting, because it won't tell you that it cut off some of your text. So you have to go back and read what you cut and pasted and make sure all of your text is in the box. It won't say, hey, you were over, and makes you edit. It just stops copying once it gets to that limit. So just know that. And then again, just proofread and edit before you're submitting, please, multiple times, or have somebody else read it, especially if you're cutting and pasting, just because it's not gonna probably show up the way that you're anticipating that it does. So we want to make sure that all of your text that you want in there is in there. And then there's a way to talk, if you want to paste without formatting, you can do Control-Shift-V, and then that way it just kind of pastes a clean version, and it takes out all of the formatting and the bold and all of that when you go ahead and do it. Attachments. Attachments are really important to your application. So I highly encourage you jump to that page first before you really dive into your application much, and you look at what is required for the application and what different attachments you have to upload. There are some that are required, and then there's a couple that are optional for you to include. The reason we want you to look early and soon is because some of them might take some time for you to pull together. If your organization is not currently registered with the Registry of Charitable Trust, or you're out of compliance with the Secretary of State, it might take some time for you to get in compliance with that. And we want to make sure that you have the documentation needed prior to the deadline to be able to do that. So this is what you should look at first. There's many different file formats that are allowable. You shouldn't have any problems uploading. If you do, please reach out to Jody or myself. If your organization does not have a certain required document for some reason, reach out to city staff, because you will need to make sure and work with us, because you can't, if it's a required document, you can't submit without uploading something. So you need to reach out to city staff so we can determine what you need to put in its place. There is an online help tab at the top of each of your web grant screens. Some of them, most of them probably are blank, but on the attachment side, I know at least there's definitions of the required attachments that are on there that explain, especially the financial ones, the difference between a general ledger and an annual budget. There's some explanations of what those are and what we're looking for. A lot of times people put the same document in all three categories, and that's not what we're looking for. So make sure that you're looking at what is required and you're uploading the proper documents. There's also a place for you to add supporting materials. So if there's something that you think benefits and supports your application that we didn't ask for, there's an opportunity for you to upload it under the attachment side. And then the Secretary of State Certificate of Status. This is important because we want you to check and make sure that you are registered and have a copy of your status uploaded as part of your application. So what we're asking for you is a printout from their website. And here's an example of what it looks like. If you go to the Secretary of State's website, they have BizFile online, and there's links throughout the application that you can click on. And then you type in your legal business name. It's going to pull up your organization's name. And then once you click on that, on the right-hand side, it'll pull up kind of like a little section over here that it's going to tell you what your current status is and that you're in good standing. This is what you want. If it says that you're inactive or that your reports are needed, then it's your responsibility to be in touch with the Secretary of State and figure out what needs to be in compliance. So when you're in this, you're going to go to save as a PDF. Make sure that your headers and footers and your background graphics are on so that it gives you the date timestamp of when you're printing this, because there's no identifying information on this that says when you're in good standing. It just tells you when your filing date was. So we want to make sure that you are doing this around the time of your application. And then you're going to save it as a PDF and then attach this as one of your attachments. We check this as well before we award grants. So this is checked multiple times, but this is your opportunity as an organization to check it and make sure it's in place and then attach to your application. So when submitting the application, WebGrants is going to send you an email confirmation as soon as you've submitted. And then once submitted, it's no longer editable. So if you forgot something or you made an error that you want to fix, if it's prior to the deadline, you can reach out to me and I will try and there's a way we can't open it and unlock it, but we can what's called negotiate, and I can send sections back to you. But you would be able to make that change prior to the deadline. If it's after the deadline, it's after the deadline, and we're not able to send those back to you to make any edits at that time. I want you to please note that staff is not monitoring the application close at 11:59 p.m. So if you have questions about your application or you have questions about the submission, please direct to staff in time for us to answer during normal business hours prior to the deadline. 11:59 p.m. is a hard deadline. The web grant system will not accept anything submitted beyond that. So even if you're in your application at 11:58, working really, really hard, once that clock passes 11:59 p.m., you're not going to be able to submit it. You can continue to put edits in there, but it won't let you actually submit it. And we can't change that for you. So please know it happens every year that there are people who are waiting and like working on it at the very last minute. That's a hard deadline. So please plan ahead for that. As I mentioned, I have several step-by-step instructional guidelines on web grants. There's some in that announcements page when you go to the website that you'll see on the right-hand side. There's also some on our grants website on the very bottom of the page. If there's something that you have questions on and you don't know how to do, please reach out and I can send you my how-to guides or walk you through it. There are some online help links at the top of the application where I put more information. Jody and I are available to assist prior to the deadline should you have any questions or need help walking through anything. It seems probably cumbersome if you haven't been in there before, but it's a pretty easy system to work through and to be able to go. As well as this webinar, we're going to be putting this webinar on our website as well as copies of the PowerPoint. So in the next day or two, should you want to rewatch this or share it with another staff who's going to be or volunteer who's going to be working on your application, you can do that as well. So that was a lot just about the application. And now we're going to talk a little bit more about the individual applications and kind of some of the questions that you're going to encounter and see in them. So for the CSG and CDBG application, the different forms or application components are broken out into general information, which is just like self-explanatory. It's your application title. So what your name of your activity is or what you're requesting funding for. I ask that you not use CDBG or CSG in the title only because it gets confusing, especially if you apply for both and we fund you under one. I usually have to go in and rename the applications at some point. But it's a good thing if you're naming it based on the type of activity that you're applying for. So if it's XYZ program, then you're titling it that. The next component is the funding component. And this is the new tab for this year if you've applied before. This is where it's going to explain the funding category. So it's going to walk through CDBG, CSG one time, and CSG traditional. And it will ask you to identify which type or types of funding you're applying for in that specific application. So it gives you the option to select what those are. And again, I highly encourage you to apply for CSG, even if you're applying for CDBG, apply for one of the CSG categories as well, most likely the traditional. And we will be able to help you decide if you're awarded what best category of funding you would fit under. The next is the project overview, then organization information, CDBG eligibility, budget attachments, and then registration certification. So those are all the different forms or pages that you have to complete in the application. For project overview, this is where we're asking you to be specific and clear about what you're requesting funding for. You're going to talk about the type or the category of activity, if it's a public service, if it's a housing program, if it's capital improvements. You're going to provide a short description of what you're requesting funding for. So kind of a 3-sentence, like this is the type of program, or this is the program that we're requesting funding, a summary of what you're looking for. And then you're going to go into more detail about your scope of services. So the who, the what, the when, the where, the specifics of the proposed activity. So we are proposing to host a teen program on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday every week for 12 weeks. The details, the time, where it's going to be, who's going to participate. We want you to be as specific as possible in that scope of services. If awarded for funding, this is what I take to build your grant agreement. So the more information, the more detail that you're giving reviewers to understand what it is that you're requesting funding for and what we would put in a scope of service in a contract. This is a very important part of your application. Next is your location of services. So where is the proposed activity going to occur? The address of the location. If it's multiple locations, where are they going to occur? If it's a capital improvement or an equipment type purchase for one-time funding, where are those materials going to be used, or where is that physical location? And then your project timeline. So talking about your start and completion dates, again, this is for July 1st through June 30th. So it has to fall within those dates. But is it a program that's going to be run for the entire calendar year or the entire program year? Is it something that's going to run like 3 cohorts for 12 weeks, different times? If it's a construction project, what is your plan for that? If your construction project goes beyond those calendar or those program year dates of July to June, how does that fall in? Like, we're starting our capital improvement program on this date, but, we anticipate using the funding during that time frame for these projects, but we anticipate, our building will be completed at this time. And then also the cost to participate. So if you have a cost for your participants to participate in your program, explaining what that is. We also ask you in the project overview to talk about your beneficiaries. So who is going to be receiving services? And this is, we want you to not explain all people who could receive services should they desire. So not entire Elk Grove population, but who do you really anticipate serving with your program? Is it 30 people? Is it 50? What is the number? Just because it's open to the entire Elk Grove community, how many do you really anticipate will be participating? We're asking that you not count the same person or household more than once. So even if it's the same person participates services every day or every week, they are only counted once during the fiscal year. So counting them once. And then being realistic. These are the goals that are going to go into your grant application. You're going to be held to them. So being realistic of who you're going to serve and how many people. If your organization tracks persons or households, you will identify that, as well as participant income level. So we want to know approximately what is your participant income level? Do you currently track that? Or what your estimates are. If you're applying for CDBG funding, this is really important because the majority of programs have to benefit low-income persons. So we need to be able to track that, or you need to be able to track as an organization what their income level is. And if you don't already, how are you estimating that for this application? And then we're also asking beneficiaries' place of residence. Are they Elk Grove residents? Or are they outside of Elk Grove? Next is organizational information. So really it's just talking about, as an organization, your summary of all the services provided. So not just what you're applying in this application, but just as an organization as a whole, what does your organization provide? If you provide 5 different programs in the community, we want you to highlight what those programs are, even if you're only applying for one program in this application. What's the experience of the organization, helping to demonstrate the capacity of the organization's ability to manage grant funding? What is your management or your staffing positions responsible for implementing the proposed activity? Do you have any partner agencies who will be assisting with the implementation of the activity that you're applying for funding? What type of partnerships you have? We also ask you to highlight your insurance. Insurance is required for all city grants, and you'll see that when you read the funding opportunity. So what is your current limits for insurance? And then if you're awarded, we would provide you information if those need to change and what you need to do. Other grants, what other grants and what other funding has the organization applied for in the last 2 years? Council has indicated in past years that grantees should be actively looking to reduce their reliance on city funding. So this is one of the things that we ask for, to kind of see, is the organization out looking for other funding to support this activity, or are they just looking for city funding? The next question, the partial funding, is a really important question that I don't want people to overlook. It's, could the proposed activity be undertaken with a reduced commitment of funding? So a lot of people request for a higher amount. So I would say, we get several applications or in for $100,000, which is the maximum under CSG. We only have 400,000 available. So it's highly unlikely that the majority of organizations who are applying for 100,000 are going to be awarded 100,000. So looking at what level of funding would you be able to continue the activity? So if you're requesting 100,000, you would need to be able to say, hey, I only want to use, if I don't get $100,000, we're not doing the activity whatsoever. That's an option, but just know that if we're unable to fulfill that $100,000, then your application will be automatically taken out of the pool. So this is, if you're like, okay, I could do the program at a reduced level for 25,000. I could reduce my numbers by X. I could reduce my staffing by this, and just show how you would do that. So we want you to explain to us what that would mean. Like if we're reducing by certain percentages of funding, then that's what you would have to reduce the number of served, or what it is that you would look at. Or you would maybe do less days a week of programming. So what does that mean to you if it had a reduced level? Next is, we're asking about organizational assets, just to look at the organization's financial stability. So including those as one of the your responses. Finally, for CDBG eligibility, to be eligible for CDBG funding, there's an additional page of questions that have to be answered. If you're only applying for CSG, then you can mark the first question as no and select not applicable on all of them. There's instructions in the application, but you need to be able to answer the questions if you are requesting CDBG funding. There's also the online help tab on the CDBG page is also really important, because it has more information on the rules and requirements and links that can take you to all of those. The CDBG national objectives, each activity that you're applying for has to fall under one of their national objectives. We ask that you provide more detailed goal, objectives, and outcome measures for that application. I'm throwing this up here as an example. I'm not going to go through it, but really kind of giving you a little bit more detail of what we're looking for when we're looking at a scope of work, or your goals and objectives and outcomes. Next is the budget page. So there are some common categories that are pre-filled in for you, like rent, or communications, personnel. Those are some categories that are already there, and you can go ahead and put in line items, dollar amounts that you're requesting under those. There's also room for other categories where you can put something if it doesn't fall in those pre-common categories. We just ask that you provide a description in the other category so that we're understanding what that is. We ask that you complete the budget form in full to show the full cost of providing the proposed activity. And then the requested amount is what you're requesting city funding for. So again, we're not looking to support 100% of project generally. So we want to be able to see where your match funding is or in-kind funding is coming, or in-kind services are coming, to show that. In-kind contributions can include cash value and non-monetary contributions that are necessary for you to provide the proposed projects. The indirect cost rate, a 10% de minimis indirect cost rate may be used for any non-federal entity that has never received a negotiated indirect cost rate. So what that means is if you're an organization who does not work on federal contracts, you can claim 10% indirect costs on any of your direct costs, and you can, excuse me, request that in your budget. If you have a federally negotiated indirect cost allocation, then you can use that amount, but you need to attach a copy of it in your attachment section so that we can verify that you have a different amount. Some organizations, some larger organizations have those, not many do, but a few do. So if you have that, you can include that. For personnel, we want you to show all relevant personnel who are working in that activity. So say you're running an after-school program. We want you to show and document all personnel that are running that activity, even if you're not requesting funding from the city to support that staff. It gives us a better picture of, how many people are or what personnel is needed to run that activity, and then what you're requesting the city from. So there's a way to be able to show all of it, and you can add them, each personnel person, and then when you fold it up into what you're requesting, say you're requesting 25% of their salary or a certain percentage, you can put that in there. But we want to kind of see the bigger picture again of what it takes to run the program in a whole. For budget narrative, for each category in which funding is requested, we ask you that you provide a description of what anticipated expenses are included. If you're requesting equipment, how is that broken down? You're asking for X number of items that are cost this much per item. Explain what that is. If it's a capital improvement project, we're looking for more detailed scopes of work and identify the types of construction that you're looking for. There's some explanation in the application that really walks you through this as well. If you're requesting more than $5,000 for your entire grant, it's strongly encouraged to include a more detailed budget and budget narrative in the supporting document section. So if you have those documents, we encourage you to upload those. For the application review criteria, we're looking at the clarity of the proposed activity. So do we understand it? What the project feasibility is, what the ability for the organization to actually complete the activity within the allotted time frame, so the July 1st to June 30th. What is your budget reasonableness? Does it make sense of what you're spending the funding on? The agency capacity, impact on priority needs, benefits to Elk Grove residents versus non-Elk Grove residents. Is it a new or increased expanded services? Does the organization have leveraged funds? Are you putting other funding towards this activity? And what are the self-supporting plans of the organization for this activity? Do you anticipate continuing to request funding for this year after year? Is it something that you're looking at other funding sources to support in the future? As we review the applications, we do send follow-up questions to most, if not every single application. So please note that we will be sending follow-up questions to you through web grants between February 24th and 28th. So it's good just to note that in your calendar to expect to look for those. They will come through as it comes through the system as it's considered a negotiation, but you'll get a list of a PDF of questions that will, or a Word document of questions that we'll ask you to respond to and send back that the reviewers ask. All of our different reviewers, when they're reviewing the application, they come up with questions and want clarification on what the activity is or certain things. And so we send those back. We have a short turnaround for responses because of our review time. And to be able to make our funding recommendations to City Council we don't have a lot of time. So please make sure that you're looking for those and are responding to those as soon as possible within the time frame allowed. And it helps the reviewers be able to fairly evaluate your application and explain and understand a little bit more about what you're looking for funding for. This is the anticipated timeline for the CDBG and CSG programs. Again, the deadline is February 11th, and then we go into reviews. We anticipate following this schedule. We want to note that the March 26th council date, this is where funding recommendations will be presented to council. So an agenda with the links to the staff report detailing the funding recommendations will be emailed out the Friday before the meeting. So I will send that all to you the Friday before March 26th for you to look at. This is where you're first going to find out whether you're recommended for funding or not. This is where the information will kind of be summarized up, and then it goes to council the following Wednesday. So this is where you're going to look at it. And then if you're, you applicants can attend the city council meeting or view an archived meeting after the fact if they choose to, but it is a public meeting and you're welcome to attend and participate in that as well. And then after the preliminary awards, we go into our public review period for our community development block grant. We have to do an action plan for that and submit that and send it out for public review. And then we go back to council May 14th, and this is where final awards are made. And this is where the final CSG awards are made. And hopefully by that date, we have a federal budget and are able to make those final allocations. If we don't have a federal budget, then the CDBG kind of gets delayed a little bit just because we're waiting on that. But last year, I think it showed up the day before. So I think we were good. And then the funding year will begin July 1st. Jody.
Now you get to give your voice a break, Alicia. All right, so now I'm going to go over the ESG grant. It's not quite as complicated as the Alicia's grants are. It's a little bit easier to go through, but these are the forms that you're going to be asked to fill out on that. A general information overview, what you're asking for, details about your event, details about your audience. We're going to ask for budget as well. We're going to ask for your registrations and certifications like Alicia talked about with California Secretary of State and Register of Charitable Trust. And you should know we check those at time of application, time of contract, time of event, and time of payment. So you'll be required to be in good standing with those two organizations throughout the whole grant period. And then we also have attachments that we ask for through this. So overview, when you're filling this out, it's going to ask you to choose the type of event you're hosting. If it's not listed, just choose other. We might reach out to you and ask, oh, what kind of event are you hosting there? We did talk about the change in public health requirements. It's just asking you, would you still host your event if there were some public health orders in place? And if not, what are your contingency plans? For the event description, we really want you to be specific here. Like some people will just copy and paste their mission right there. That's not what we're looking for. We really want to hear about the event. So if you're doing a festival, say, oh, we're going to do a festival and we're going to close the roads and we're going to have a bunch of vendors and we're going to have a music stage. We're going to have a kids area. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Be very specific on that part, please, for us, because we take that and that's what we put into the scope of your grant to kind of describe what your event is and what it is you're trying to accomplish with this for residents of the city of Elk Grove. We do have a question in there asking you, what is the citywide significance of this event? So again, be specific on the impact that your event's going to have on the community, like who it's benefiting. Is it drawing regional visitation? Does it play towards the city's diversity and the city being a welcome to all cities? So things that would really make your event have citywide significance. Those are the kinds of events that we're hoping to sponsor and work on the council goals of drawing visitation and offering different kinds of programming to our residents. We're going to ask for the date. If it's unconfirmed, that's fine. You can just let us know when you do have it. And be specific on your hours, because if you're using one of the city's facilities, we need to put that into your contract. So it won't just be, you won't have District 56 just for the hours of your event. You'll also have them for setup and for teardown. And it also helps us budget because the grants, or my budget does get charged for all of those hours if it's an hourly rate. And if it's a weekend, that's a lot more expensive than a weekday. So just things to keep in mind when you're filling out the application for us. The types of things you can ask for, we already went through this, but I'm going to go through a little bit more in depth here. Just a couple notes. Old Town Plaza is gorgeous. If you haven't been there or been to an event there, just note that it's an outdoor only venue. So the grant only covers the cost of the rental facilities and not any other hard costs. So if you need security, staff, etc., that's something that you would have to cover out there. And also know that District 56 is booking into 2026 and 2027 at this point. So just note that if your first preference is not available, staff will reach out to you to see if, there's some other dates you might want to look at. Like I said, Fridays and Saturdays are almost booked throughout the end of the year. So Thursdays are great. Sundays are great. So think about that when you are applying, or if you really want to hold it now, I would call District 56 and I would put down a deposit. It will be refundable should you get the grant. But if there's a date that you're really hoping for, I would call them now and see what is actually available before turning in your application. There's another section on there that says others. So like if you wanted the mayor to come speak at your event, or you are going to put together 100 goodie bags and you want some city pencils or some city swag, or you're looking for someone that can MC the event, just put that there in the other. And we did talk about that in-kind services that we don't provide police as security, that you're responsible for coordinating your own, especially if you have alcohol. You have to have security there that is checking IDs, is making sure people don't leave your event with any alcohol in hand. They need to stay in the fenced off area. Police will be there for overall event security and to step in if anything should happen, but you're responsible for security. And we also don't have any equipment available for grantees or for rent. A lot of people think we have a lot of tables and chairs and things like that. I actually only have 10 tables and like 15 chairs for my own events that I host for like 20,000 people. So we unfortunately do not have a trailer for equipment that we can rent out to you. Road closures. So if you're asking to close a road for a parade or a run or something like that, there's some other requirements that you're going to have to fulfill in order to make sure that that happens. There'll be a street use permit. You'll have to work with CSD Fire on a special event permit if you're closing a road, because they need to know the alternate plans for their fire engines to get through in case of emergency. And then there will be a meeting with our police department and public works, and fire is invited to that meeting with the event organizer, so we can go through all of that, but you'll be required to fill out a permit with them and a street use permit if you are closing a road. Under insurance, there's a couple of new questions in there where we're asking if you have employees or if you need auto insurance. A lot of nonprofits don't have employees, and we've asked for, workers' compensation. And I've been getting some emails through WebGrant saying, oh, we don't have employees. Do we need to provide this? So this year we're adding some clarification questions into WebGrants to help us better let you know what kind of insurance we need from you. If you're going to be serving alcohol, you're going to be required to have liquor liability on your insurance. So everyone's going to be a little bit different. So instead of a one-size-fits-all approach this year, we're hoping to look at all the applications once they're in and customize insurance requirements for each grant depending on what kind of event you're doing. So make sure and fill those out. For auto insurance, we're asking you if you plan on driving on grounds. So like for the plaza, you can drop the bollards and you can drive in along the side to unload. You can let vendors drive in, but that requires auto insurance. So if you don't want to provide auto insurance, you cannot drive on grounds. Same with District 56. There's a fire lane you can drive on. You can't drive through the grounds there, but there are fire lanes you can come up on. Same thing. If you plan on doing that, we're going to ask for auto insurance. So things to keep in mind when you're filling out that application. Little bit tweaks to the application this year. We've required volunteers in the past, but I just want to bring this up again, that when you go to contract with us, there'll be a form on the contract that you're going to have to fill out. You're going to have to put in name, phone number, contact information for these volunteers. And this is so our police department can work with them ahead of time to have a pre-meeting of the event. PD does all of the major road closures for those, but they do require volunteers to help with some of the internal streets that are being closed. You'll be paired with a police officer, but they need people, volunteers that are helping to man those road closures, and PD's manning the big, large ones. And it's just helping out with the runs to make sure that neighbors know what's going on, who can be let in and out, things like that. So think about that. If you're doing a run or a parade and you're closing roads, you may be asked to provide a certain amount of volunteers. PD determines that number that they need, and that will happen in that meeting. If you don't come up with enough, you could be charged out of pocket if additional officers are needed outside of the original plan. I talked about us meeting with PD prior to approving your application, and they will say to me, hey, there's like 3,000 people here. This is going to require 5 officers and 2 sergeants. Here's the cost. And then anything above that, if you did not come up with the volunteers they asked for, could be charged at the overtime rate, which is around $100 and something an hour currently. New this year, we're going to ask that following a run or a parade that you do a litter sweep. There's been some instances where people have run through District 56 or on the road or wherever, and sometimes people are throwing their water cups or people are throwing trash or things like that. And then there's a festival following. And so sometimes it's been neglected that people will go do a walk after along the route and make sure that the road is clear. For parades, we're going to work into the grants this year, a street sweeper, because some of the parades leave a lot more on the roads than a run would. But for runs, we still want you to come and make sure that the area is clear of debris when you leave. We'd like you to leave the facility as you received it. We talked about registrations and certifications. Another thing on the application that you'll see is food recycling. We still have California law SB 1383, and it's asking that you do your best to keep recycling, organics, and garbage separate at your events. You will get all 3 of those carts should you need them for depending on what type of event you have. It will tell you too that we ask that you put them in 3s. So you don't just put a row of garbage, a row of organics. They like to have them in 3s. So you have a trash, an organic, and a recycling cart all together, 3 different colors. And hopefully people will put in the right ones. We know that doesn't always happen, but we ask you to do your best to try and make sure that you make it as easy as possible for anyone attending your event. Eventually, it will be mandated and enforced. We're very lucky right now that it's not. So it gives everyone time to get familiar with it and help your guests do the right thing. And this is our timeline, as Alicia talked about. Ours is a little bit later than hers. That gives you time to apply for her grants. And should anything need to fall into an event grant instead, you have time to apply for mine as well. After everything's brought in, we do have a review period with internal and external stakeholders where we go through all of the applications, and all of our departments are present, including police, public works, facilities, everyone. And that's where I get all of the budgeting from them. So I take all that math and do some mathing and combine to a big spreadsheet that I then present to city council and our city manager. And once they're awarded in May and June, that again is for events that start on July 1.
We're almost at the home stretch, I promise. We're just gonna go over some grant policies, and then we'll open it up for question and answers. So some basic information: awarded applicants will receive 1 or more grant agreements based on the funding source. So you'll receive different agreements for different activities. If it's CSG and CDBG, if you're requesting both CSG and CDBG, you're gonna get, for one activity, you're gonna get 2 different grant agreements for each funding source because of the requirements for each of those. But agreements are sent electronically through DocuSign. If you request a hard copy, we can make that an option, but generally we've moved to electronic signatures, which helps move the process much quicker. We ask that when you receive those, that you read it carefully before signing. Don't sign it and then read it later and then come back to us, because it is in DocuSign, they move quickly. And sometimes as soon as you sign it, it'll go through our city manager, our city attorney, and our city clerk within minutes, and it can be executed almost immediately. So as soon as it's executed, any changes to it need to be done through a contract amendment, which requires more paperwork and more signatures. So making sure you're reading it before you're signing it. And if there's any edits or concerns or questions, that you address those prior to signing. As we've mentioned, insurance coverage is required. The types and amounts will vary based on your activity or your event. And so you will receive information from the city or from our third-party vendor that we work with for insurance on what is required. You'll see that when you see your award agreement, when it gets sent to you, that's one of the sections that's in there. So you'll be able to read through it and see what those are prior to signing it. So making sure that those are met. And then file retention, our CSG and CDBG grants, they have a 5-year file retention, so all grant-related files must be maintained for that long. And for event sponsorship, it's 2 years. So making sure as an organization you have those practices and policies in place. We've talked about this before, but I'm going to mention again, organizational standing. Grantees have to be in good standing with both the California Secretary of State and the California Attorney General Registry of Charitable Trusts if required by law to be registered. So check with your attorneys and your boards to make sure that you are registered. Should you need to be, there's links here where you can look up your organization to find what your current status is. Your activity, your standings must be active and current prior to the execution of an agreement throughout the grant terms. We check it periodically before we disperse grant funding. So if you're CSG and CDBG, you're going to get quarterly reimbursements. We're checking it as much as we can to make sure that prior to writing you a check each time that you're current and active. Those statuses can go in and out throughout the year. Depending on when you submit your reports or when your reports were due, there's flexibilities in them of how those 2 different programs operate, but making sure if it goes out of compliance, we will notify you that we have to hold your payment until that's in compliance. So making sure that you're responsible as an organization and staying on top of those. And then for CDBG, because you're a subrecipient of federal funds, you also have to be registered in sam.gov. And have a unique entity ID and maintain an active registration. So it's not just enough to have a unique entity ID and do that, which is a really basic step, but you have to actually register and make sure that you're in active registration and that you're not debarred, because we need to check that before we're allowed to enter into a contract with you for that. For communications and city logos. So grantees must include the city's name and or logo in all materials identifying sponsors, donors, and contributors to your activity, event, or organization. So if you are identifying any other sponsor to your program or your activity, then you also need to include the city in that same communications. With that said, you all have to obtain city approval before using our city's name or logo in any of those communications. So we're asking that you submit those materials to whether it's events, you submit it to Jody, or if it's community service or community development block grant, you submit it to us, to me via email, and you say, hey, we want to put the city's logo on this document or on this webpage or on what it is. And then our public affairs team will review that and they will look at it and tell you, okay, this is the logo we want you to use and this is how we want you to use it. It's super fast approval. It doesn't take weeks. Some days it's like within the same hour. So it's maybe a day. They're really quick at turning them around and getting them back. So don't think it's going to be a really lengthy process. But we want you to send it to us before you put the city logo on it. They're trying to avoid things like putting the city's logo in a box. We have branding just like you guys have branding, and they want to make sure that the city is branded properly. So please send us to us prior to publishing anything. In cases where the grantee funding is related to the arts, so whether it's an art organization who's applying for funding, or if you're doing an event that is related to the arts, you also have to display the logo for the Elk Grove Arts and Creative Economy Commission in those communications as well. So making sure that you are putting that in your request so that we can provide those specific logos for those as well.
And
All
I
of
will
these terms-
add
Oh,
I'll
go ahead.
add that when we send out the contracts, like we usually send an email first and say, we're about to send your contract through DocuSign. Please be aware of the insurance on these pages. Please be aware of your integrated waste form on these page. I'm attaching the city's logo for your use. And I usually attach 3 different versions, like a black and white, a color, a high res, a low res. And then if I know that your event is related to the arts, I'll say I'm also attaching the Elk Grove Arts and Creative Economy Commission. So we try and make it as easy as we can for you, but if you need it differently, we have logos that are vertical, horizontal, we have white, full color, black. So we have many different versions we can send you. Just ask us for what you need, please.
And Jody does more probably for her events than I do for my grants, in terms of that. So for me, you have to just email me and say, hey, this is what I want to put your logo on, and we'll get you that. So payment policies, payment requests are all submitted in web grants. So if you're awarded funding, everything's going to be managed in web grants. You're going to maintain that. Your application will then be turned into an active grant, and your reports will be set up there. And your this is where you're going to submit your payment request. CSG and CDBG are reimbursable grants. So this is not, you don't receive funding up front. You're asking for reimbursements on a quarterly basis. There are a few instances where advances may be approved. They have to be requested in advance in writing, and our city manager has to approve those before. So I'm trying to think, in the 6 years I've been here, I don't think we've had a grant that was had an advance on it. So it's pretty rare, but maybe for a capital improvement project or something like that, there could be justification for that. For the most part, we are a reimbursement only grant. The event services grant, those payments may be requested in advance no more than 30 days prior to the event date. So you can put those in prior to your event date in web grants to get reimbursed. All required documentation, so whether it's a report is required, or for events, your summary forms, your permits, all of that has to be in place and submitted prior to your payment being, your request being paid. For community service grant and community development block grant, you have different reports. I think those might be on the next page, but those need to be submitted in order for us to reimburse your quarterly reimbursements. Again, we're going to check your standing with Secretary of State and Registry of Charitable Trusts and sam.gov if you're a CDBG. And if you fail to comply with the terms and conditions of your agreement, including but not limited to complying with applicable public health restrictions, meeting goals, numbers served, this may result in the city reducing or terminating your funds. Required reporting, again, it's going to happen through web grants. The CSG and CDBG grants have quarterly or mid-year. CDBG is quarterly, so you'll be reporting every quarter on those that are served, as well as their race, ethnicity, and income status for CDBG. CSG is mid-year and end of year. You're collecting those demographic characteristics for CDBG, and then we have an annual report for both programs describing persons served and your accomplishments. Those are pre-populated. Those reports are pre-populated in or pre-started in web grants for you. So you'll see them day one of your grant, and you'll be able to go in and look at what those questions are and how you need to be answering them and when they're due. And then the financial reporting, it depends on the type and amount of grant that you have. Federal is requiring more in terms of the funding requirements for that. And then for event sponsorship grants, Jody, do you want to touch on yours?
Sure. We ask for a post-event summary report. So once you're done with your event, you have 60 days to submit a post report to us, and we're basically asking about how the event go. What do you think went great? What were the highlights? And we're asking for attendance numbers. We have quarterly attendance numbers that we submit to council. It's not by event, so it's approximate. We know that a lot of these events aren't ticketed, so you're not going to have an actual attendance number, but it's approximate how many people you think attended, and we're going to ask you how many do you think were from out of town. So again, approximate numbers. We don't give these to council by event. We do a lump sum of all the events per quarter, and we give those to council to show what kind of visitation we're drawing to the city. For
technical assistance and monitoring, staff, we're available throughout the year. our goal is that you're successful in your event, your activity, whatever it is that you're awarded to do. So we, for community service and CDBG, I've done on-site technical assistance for reporting and invoicing. I can usually jump on a Zoom or jump on the computer really quick and be able to walk you through web grants or any of the technical stuff that you need. For new grantees, I would say, the first couple reimbursement requests we generally go through together because the city does request a lot of documentation and information. And so there's some back and forth. It's not unlikely that that will occur. So just know it's normal. If you have any modifications to your scope of work, your event, your budget, anything, I encourage you to reach out to city staff and let us know. It's so much easier to deal with it before it happens than after the event or after the activity and trying to figure out how, if it fits within the scope. If it's a major change in the scope or in the budget, we have to do a contract amendment for that. There are some things we can have administratively changed, but for the most part, we have to do things that are contract amendments that take time. So please give us a heads up and let us know, and we are here to work with you and to go through that. If you have questions with navigating web grants, again, I have how-to documents, but I'm also happy to jump on a call and walk you through things over the phone. I'm pretty adept at being able to get you through that. All grants are subject to financial and program audits to ensure accountability, proper use of funds, and compliance with the grant requirements. CSG and CDBG have more, of course. We will do we'll do some on monitoring each year of different applications or different funded grants. We look at financials, program documentation, and overall performance to ensure that the funds are being used appropriately and the program goals are being met. CDBG also is eligible for federal audit. Should we be audited by HUD and they come to look at your program, they would pull that as well. So just knowing those as well. And again, all of this is in a contract. Your contracts are very in-depth and lengthy and have all of these terms in them as well. So that is kind of that's our spiel, the main information that we wanted to get across. At this time, we're gonna open it for Q&A. You can continue to put them in the Q&A session, but if you want to raise your hand, I think there's ways to do that as well, and we can unmute you and you can ask questions live. I'm gonna start while people are thinking of questions. I'll go through the questions that are still kind of pending out here that I haven't gotten answered. One is asking to restate for each of the 3 funding ops, how much is available and how many anticipated grantees awards per grant type. The first part is easier to answer than the second. And looking at how much is available, let me pull up my
And you're also going to get a copy of it
Yeah.
too. So you'll be able to go back and look at that and it will show you the numbers. I can tell for the second part that Alicia was saying, it depends on how many people apply, how much funding they're asking for, how the review process goes. So there's a lot of different things that can go into how many we actually award. Like I said, I had 42 events this last year from, I think, 33 nonprofits. So several nonprofits had more than one event that was awarded. Several nonprofits just had one. It all depends on the applications that we receive.
Yeah, and that's the same for CSG and CDBG. The funding for CSG though, the total amount under traditional, so the ongoing programming is 462,313. And then the one-time total amount available is 100,000. For CDBG, public services is generally what people apply for. The amount available in that category is only 147,413. We have almost 700,000 in capital projects should people request under that. But there's, again, it's limited to who who applies, what they're requesting for, and looking at, you know, historically, if you want to go back and look at prior years funding, you can like look at prior years council's members and or council meetings and see what was funded in prior years to kind of get a better idea. Those are available on the city's website. question on the registrations and certifications required in the applications. We talked about the registrations are gonna be your, registrations with the Secretary of State and the Attorney General's, sam.gov. The certification is just whoever's completing the application checking a box to make sure that you're certifying to the best of your knowledge and ability that what you're submitting is true and correct. And so that's what the certification is. Once you're in the application, you're able to go through and look at all of the questions prior to starting entering in information. So you'll be able to look at that. CSG, does the CSG grant require the organization to target low-income residents? That is not a requirement of the CSG program. CSG is required that they're Elk Grove residents. Overall, in general, we look at CDBG is a requirement for low income, but we do look at low income as a priority population, but it is not a requirement for the CSG. The next is a question about the organization is currently registered in another state and looking at if they're obtaining their registration for California, can they show that their applications is in process? There is when you look at the registration and certification page for CSG and CDBG, one of the questions asks you to tell you what your status is, whether you're current or not registered or whatever it is. And then if it says not registered or in process is one of, I think, the options, there's a text box, a box for you to be able to explain where you're at in the process. If you're in the process of applying at the time of the application deadline, you're still eligible to be considered. But we do want to see where you're at in the process. We don't want you to wait until after to apply because timeline, it just doesn't work in terms of being able to get our grant agreements out. So if you're showing me that, you've submitted the paperwork on this date and it usually takes 2 weeks or whatever it is that you've already done some of that stuff, that helps our reviewers to be able to determine. So you have the opportunity to explain that in your grant application. Let's see, next question. Are there any farming or farming education grants you are aware of that pay in advance versus reimbursement? I'm not sure. I don't know. In terms of the city, we haven't had a specific farming or farming education program or grant. So I am unaware of that. I know there's some different nonprofit resources in Sacramento County that might be more able to answer that question. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Let's see, are there any questions or does anybody want to raise their hand? I don't see anyone. Oh, somebody, there we go. All right, Rachel, go ahead and ask your question. Oh, I think you have to unmute yourself.
Okay. Can you
There
hear me
you go.
now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yes, I'm asking, how do you get on the calendar if you want to do an event at your designated venues?
Which calendar are you asking about?
Like the Old Town Plaza, the Avenue. How do you get on the calendar if approved? Yeah.
Yeah, so when you fill out your application, you have in there, what date do you want, right? And so once we
Right.
see that, we have the rental management team of District 56 and Old Town Plaza reviewing these applications at the same time. And they'll say, yes, that date's available. Or if it's not available, they'll reach out and say, this date's not available. Here's some dates in that month that are available. And so we will work with you to try and find a date that is. And like I said, District 56, pretty booked. Old Town Plaza, not as booked.
Okay.
So it all depends on what date you're looking for.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, any other questions?
Looks like there's one more in the
Oh,
Q&A.
sorry. We provide digital skills training. Do you recommend applying for CDBG or CSG both? So it depends on who you're providing the digital skills training to. It depends if you're targeting low income, then CDBG might be a great program for you to apply for. CDBG comes with requirements to document income, race, ethnicity, demographics for every client served in that program. So if your organization already collects that documentation on all of your participants and you're able to say the majority of those served are low income, they have to attest to being low income and certify themselves every year. They're the federal rates. I think I put them some examples of what low income is determined by the federal government in our PowerPoint slides earlier, and they're in the application as well. If you collect that information or are able to collect that information, should you be funded, then CDBG is a great program for you to apply for. I would also recommend that if you're applying for CDBG, you're also applying for CSG traditional for kind of the ongoing program. And then that way we're able to help determine where we have funding if you're selected for funding. If you don't think that you can collect that data on your residents, or you don't want to have the administrative burden of managing a federal grant, then I recommend CSG only. But as you'll go through the application, again, click on the online help on the CDBG page and read through the requirements for CDBG and kind of look at some of those to see if that is something that your organization is able to do. So question on if your participants are on Social Security or Social Security, is that considered to be low income? I would have to look at, it might be, I would have to look at the amounts. I am not an expert in income levels, unfortunately. We'd have to look at the amounts. They would still have to certify that they're underneath depends on their household size, right? And how many people are in there and how much their household is, if they're single or if they have, they're living with others in their house. So there are some questions in there to look at. So I can't quite say yes to that question. Is there anything to prevent asking for funding based on programs or events benefiting a specific ethnic group? I can answer that for CSG and CDBG specifically. We have funded programs that are more aligned with specific ethnic groups. However, they have to be open to all. It cannot be something that is specifically only allowing registrations for one specific ethnic group or race identity. We've even had programs where as long as the organization is providing, I think in years past, we've had programs like youth programs. They're like, we want to fund a girls program. They had to also be providing a boys program, not necessarily with funding from the city, but they had to be able to provide an alternate program so that they could be able to show that they were not discriminating against. So as long as it's a program that is open to all, it can have a focus, but it needs to be a program or activity that's open to all.
Same for events. It can fund a specific thing, but it needs to be open to everyone.
Okay, any other questions?
That's good.
I will, it takes a while for the closed captioned, I think, to be done on the video. So it takes a little bit for us to pull the video and post it on our website, but I would anticipate maybe tomorrow or the following day. We'll also have a PDF copy of the PowerPoint slides that will be posted along with it. So you'll be able to go back and reference those. If you have questions that were not answered in today's call, you can go ahead and reach out to, sorry, my slides. This is where everything will be posted on our website. But if you have questions that weren't answered, please reach out to Jody or myself, and we're happy to answer questions throughout the application period. Again, if you're asking questions, we ask that you not wait until the very last day and the very last minute. We'll answer our phones to the best of our ability on that day, but we want to make sure that we're answering and getting things taken care of ahead of time and helping you in supporting your applications. So we're here for you to reply. Feel free to shoot us an email or give us a call and we can help walk you through that.
Thanks,
And
everyone,
with
for
that-
attending. We're looking forward to getting your applications. I saw one come in while we were on the call, so that's exciting. I know.
That is exciting. I think there's one more. Oh, there was just a thank you. Okay. Well, thank you all. And I think when you're done, you might get a quick survey when you log out, if you don't mind taking just a couple minutes to answer that and to help us out with that. And thanks, everybody.